Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As you all can see, I am not Umar. He called in sick, so you guys are stuck with me today. Alhamdulillah. The issue with Umar calling in sick, first of all, we asked that Allah give him shifa'un kamilan wa ajilan. We asked that Allah cure him and return him back to good health. Umar was actually the founder of the Dawah Club when he was a student here at UNCC. I've known him since I was around 5 or 6 years old, so I've known him a very long time. And this was his initiative. You see, he's the one that started the club. He's the one that started doing the tables and things. And alhamdulillah, it's grown to where we are today. Umar chose the topic of legacy, right? For me, I'll tell you guys, I'm not good at motivational topics. I'm not very good at them. I prefer teaching. If we were to go educational, this is the evidence, this is this. That's more my style and what I'm good with. So I'll let you guys choose. Raise your hand if you want me to try to stick to Umar's topic, or if you guys want to come up with a topic of yourself. Raise your hand. So if you want to stick with Umar's topic, raise your hand. So 3, 4, 5, okay. And are there any suggestions for any other topics or any other things that you want to hear from? Don't be shy. I was thinking we can do misconceptions. Misconceptions, because then everyone could say something they've heard that they're not sure about, and then we'll talk about how we answer it. Or if someone were to come to the table, for example, we'll talk about how to answer those specific things. Does that sound good to you guys? Okay. Should we start with misconceptions then? Raise your hand. All right, bismillah. Who has the first misconception that we want to tackle? You guys chose the topic, so you can't say we don't know, right? I didn't choose it. Misconceptions. Any misconceptions about Islam? But which one? I didn't hear what you said. No? Okay. Misconceptions. Okay. So we could talk about where misconceptions come from, right? When we look at Islam in history, we have always been a global superpower, right? Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he died, the Hijaz area is Mecca and Medina, and some surrounding areas, that was what was considered Muslim, right? Towards the very end of his life, you saw Yemen becoming Muslim, right? He sent Mu'adh bin Jabal, is one of the scholars of Islam, he sent him to Yemen. You saw the eastern of the area of the peninsula, this was becoming Muslim right as he died, ﷺ. And when he died, who became Khalifa was Abu Bakr. And when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ died, Abu Bakr became the Khalifa. And because the Prophet died, you have a lot of people began leaving Islam saying the Prophet's dead, so Islam is no longer true, right? So that's why Abu Bakr's Khalifa, there wasn't that much expansion in terms of space. It's because he was fighting civil war with groups of people that left Islam, or even people claiming to be prophets, right? You had, I think, around 10 to 12 individuals claiming to be prophets during the 2 years that Abu Bakr was Khalifa, right? So he fought these people and he beat them in war. Now when Umar became Khalifa, this is when you see massive conquest, and this is when you see massive expansion of Islam, right? You have the opening of Palestine, right? You have the opening of Egypt. You have the opening of Iraq. You have the opening of, and Iraq was the major superpower in Islam for majority of Islamic history. You have Baghdad, you have Kufa. Baghdad was the center of knowledge on earth for hundreds of years, right? And then when Uthman was Khalifa, you have Islam going all the way to Spain and all the way to Sindh. What area is Sindh in today? Who knows what Sindh is? Sindh is modern day Pakistan, Afghanistan, right? That's where Sindh is today. So going all the way from China, India, all the way to Spain, right, is one of the largest empires to ever exist on earth. This occurred how many years after the Prophet's death? Around 15 to 40 years, right? This is when the massive expansion started happening, right? Abu Bakr was Khalifa for how many years? We said 2 years. And then Umar was Khalifa for 10 years. And then Uthman was Khalifa for 12, and then Ali was Khalifa for 6, right? And these 4 men are the Khulafa al-Rashidun, right? And this period, there's already enough misconceptions when it comes to Islam outside of non-Muslims coming in, right? Maybe we'll do another talk or something about this in the future, because it's a very, very long topic, and there's a lot of disagreements that Muslims have with each other about this time period, right? I guess this is a good segue to the first misconception, is when we hear Islam spread by the sword, right? Who's heard this misconception? That's it? I don't imagine everyone has heard this misconception, right? Islam spread by the sword. You guys are barbarians, you guys are warmongers, right? When we say Islam spread by the sword, you can understand this in two ways: Islam as an empire and Islam as a religion, right? Now, can religion spread by the sword? Yes. So you can force someone to say that they're a part of the faith. Can empire spread by peace? Do you ever have people willingly join empires? Be like, I want to join your empire, en masse, the way that people joined the Islamic empire? We've never seen it in that way, right? So when we say Islam spread, when people say Islam spread by the sword, if they're speaking about the empire, yes, that's true. Why? Because the Muslims, when they would enter an area, they would come to the ruler, they say, we want to spread this religion. We want to spread this religion. And how society worked back then is the whole society was underneath one religion, right? And this is the reason why when Umar conquered Palestine, why they were so eager to accept him as the ruler. It's because you had two types of Christians back then. You had one type, which was the Byzantines, is the Eastern Roman Empire. They were the ones ruling Palestine. And then you had a minor sect of Christianity, and those are the ones that actually resided in Palestine. Now, when you have Eastern Byzantine Christians, they're enforcing their beliefs on other Christians, right? So they were oppressing the Christians that were occupying Palestine. Now, does the Muslim care what type of Christianity you follow? Did Umar ibn Khattab, did he ask, I'm only going to allow you guys to follow this Christianity, I'm not going to let you guys follow this one? Did he say that? No, all Christians are the same under Islamic rule. So they were actually embracing the Muslims when the Muslims conquered Palestine, because they wanted the Muslims to come. So because it removes the aspect of oppression from other Christians, right? So the Muslims come into an area, they say, we want to spread this religion. If they're denied access from spreading the religion, that's when war is waged. And because society back then is whatever religion the leader follows, everyone follows, that's how wars were waged, and that's how Islam spread as an empire. Now, there are censuses going up to 600, 700 years after the death of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. For example, in Egypt, I'm trying to remember the name of the sheikh that mentioned it, subhanAllah. It's slipping my mind right now. But we have around 700 Hijri, so 700 years after the death of Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ, you have, not necessarily, it's not as strict a census as we have today, but it's a generalization of an Egyptian scholar saying that half of Egypt has become Muslim around this time. How many years after the death of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? 700 years. Does that mean that there was forced conversion during the conquest of Egypt? No, because if there was forced conversion, then the whole population would be considered Muslim, right? So the fact that we have seen a slow increase in the population of Muslims through conversions and through birth, this is evidence of Islam not spreading by the sword, right? When you look at the non-Muslim populations in Muslim countries, what are the largest? You have Egypt is around 10%. You have Palestine, even Palestine pre-1948, pre-1917, pre the Balfour Declaration, you had around also 10% of Christians and Jews. Syria, same thing until today. Jordan is around 5%. These are the largest. If Islam came and spread by the sword and decimated the local population that refused to convert, it would be 100%, right or wrong? So the fact that we have Christian populations and non-Muslim populations in these countries is evidence that Islam didn't force people to convert. Now, what's the evidence in the Quran that you're not allowed to force people to convert in Islam? Who knows? Lakum dinukum waliyadin? Not necessarily, right? Lakum dinukum waliyadin is Surah Al-Kafirun. It was revealed early on in Islam, right? When Prophet Muhammad ﷺ began spreading Islam to the Quraysh, he began doing the da'wah publicly. You had the Quraysh come and they said, let's follow your religion for a day and then you follow our religion for a day, right? So that's when this surah was revealed, and that's why it repeats the ayah twice, right? قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ لَا أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدتُّمْ وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. The reason, the Mufassirin, they say the reason the ayah repeats twice is to mock the Quraysh for saying that we're going to switch back and forth between the religions. So Allah, He kind of did the same. He switched between the verses, then He went back to it as a way of mocking them, right? Not necessarily, because lakum dinukum waliya din doesn't necessarily mean you can't force people to the religion, but it means that religions are different, right? There's an explicit verse in Surah Al-Baqarah. It's the ayah right after Ayat Al-Kursi, right? So Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 256. What does it say? La ikraha fi din, is there is no compulsion in the religion. Now, let's look at why this ayah came down. And this is one of the sciences of the Quran. The Quran, did it come down all at once? No, it came down over a period of 23 years. right? And then if certain thing happened, a verse would be revealed. If someone came and asked a specific question, a certain verse would be revealed. It wasn't revealed all at once in the beginning of prophethood, right? Rather, it kept going from beginning of prophethood until the prophet's death. You had verses coming down, and you had entire chapters coming down, explaining certain things or answering certain questions. Now, the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, لا إكراه في الدين, if you guys want to pull it up, you can look at it. It's verse 256 in Surah Al-Baqarah. لا إكراه في الدين is there is no compulsion in religion. You can't force people when it comes to their religion. The reason this verse was revealed, in Medina you had two faiths. What were they? Or technically three with the coming of Islam. So you had the Muslims, and then you had the Jews, and then the third is the which ones? Sabians. Not necessarily in Medina, but they were groups of them throughout the thing. But a large group was before the Muslims came to Medina. What was it? Pagan, yeah, mushriks, right? So you had these three groups of people living in Medina. Who was the elites of society before Islam in Medina? I hear someone saying something, but it's not very clear to me. Who was the elite of society before Islam in Medina? I mean, it's 50-50 chance, right? The Jews, they're the Yahud in Medina at the time, they were seen as the elite in society for a multitude of reasons. Number one, they had a religious book. The Arabs didn't have a religious book, right? They had a written language. The Arabs didn't have a written language before the Quran. You had bits and pieces of poetry and like things, but it wasn't a language of writing. Right? You see, the vast majority of Arabs didn't know how to read and write before Islam, right? I think some scholars of Sirah, they say before Islam only 10 people in Mecca knew how to write and read before Islam, right? So when you have a superior group of people and then an inferior group of people, what ended up happening before Islam is some of the Arabs, what they would do is if they were poor and they weren't able to raise their children, or they wanted to raise their children to be knowledgeable people, they would take their kids and send them to a Jewish family, and in exchange they either work for the Jewish family or give them money or whatever, so that the child can be raised Jewish to be seen as superior. Does that make sense? No. Because these children were raised Jewish, what faith did they practice? Judaism, right? Now, when the Prophet ﷺ conquered, when he was expelling the three Jewish tribes, so first of them was, who remembers? Banu Qaynuqa, and the second one was Banu Nadir, and the third one was Banu Qurayza, right? Banu Qurayza, they were the largest tribe, and they were the last one to be kicked out because they explicitly broke a treaty against the Muslims, and they put Muslim women and children in danger. So when the Prophet ﷺ was expelling them, who was amongst them that was being expelled was the children of these Arabs that were raised Jewish. So you had some of the Muslims who they have some kids that were raised Jewish. If they're men, they were being executed because they broke the treaty. And if they're women and children, they were being expelled. What did they come tell the Prophet ﷺ? They said, "They're our children. Leave them. Like have them become Muslim." Or they were trying to force their children to say the Shahada so that they could be left in Medina. And then this verse came down, "La ikrah fi din," you can't force people to say the Shahada, right? Interestingly enough, this verse came down to prevent people from saving their children, right? And people ignore it and they say that Islam wishes to destroy people. Okay, I think that's good for the first misconception. Before we move on, is there any questions about the first one? About Islam spreading by the sword? So I can test you guys on this topic and you guys will get 100%? Right. Yeah? Okay. When I teach little kids, one of them, she always asks for a test every single day. I meet with them twice a week. She asks for a test every week, and the rest of them, all like 10, 12 of them, they all say like, no, no, no test. And I've never mentioned the test or anything. I don't know where she gets it from, but I don't think anyone likes tests, right? Except her. SubhanAllah. Okay. Now that I've given you guys some time to think, who has another misconception? I spent 13 minutes on the first one. I think that's enough time for you guys to think of something else, right?
The four imams in Islam and how different people follow specific imams.
Okay. The four imams in Islam. Okay. Very, very good question. So I wouldn't say this is a misconception from non-Muslims. Rather, it's a misconception amongst Muslims themselves, right? So who knows who the four imams are? You guys know who they are? by name? You guys know their names. Maybe it's just not coming to your mind because we've all heard their names before, right? The first one is Imam Abu Hanifa, right? Imam Abu Hanifa was the first of the four Imams we have today, right? And then it was Imam Malik, and then it was Imam Shafi'i, and then it was Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, radiyallahu anhum ajma'in, right? May Allah have mercy upon them and may Allah be pleased with them, all of them. Now, when we see the four Imams, number one, who knows why these four are the four Imams that we have today? It's a very simple question. It's a very simple answer. Don't overthink it. Yeah. Most prominent madhabs? Yeah, you're on the right track. They were the ones that had students. You think about Islamic history, there were thousands and hundreds of thousands of religious scholars, right? Imam al-Shafi'i himself. Who was Imam al-Shafi'i's teacher? Actually, this is a good point. Now, a lot of people, they think that all the Imams disagree on everything, right? Imam Abu Hanifa, he had two main students, right? These students were the teachers of Imam Malik. Does that make sense? Imam Malik's main student was Imam al-Shafi'i. And Imam al-Shafi'i's main student was Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So they're all connected. It's not like they have vast disagreements or they're not connected or they didn't know or love each other, right? Now, the reason these four madhab are the ones that are left is because they were the ones that had students that captured the madhab and wrote it down and spread it, right? You have Imam al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah, he mentions another Imam. And this is a very good point. Who's ever heard of an Imam named Layth ibn Sa'd? Who's ever heard of this man? None of us, right? It's a very rare name, like it's not common. Imam al-Shafi'i said about Layth ibn Sa'd, he said he is more knowledgeable than Imam Malik. He said about Layth ibn Sa'd, he is more knowledgeable than Imam Malik. But he didn't have students to write down his madhab. So his madhab died out, or it was eaten up, I guess, or swallowed by the other madhab, right? You have Sufyan al-Thawri, another amazing scholar of Islam, right? His madhab, the reason we don't have a Thawri madhab, right? That sounds kind of weird if you know what the word Thawri means in Arabic, but Thawri means revolution in Arabic, or yeah. So it sounds kind of weird if you translate it, but or the Sufyani madhab. The reason we don't have this madhab is because he didn't have students to carry on the madhab. So any teachings he had, it was kind of adopted by the other madhab, or it just was agreed upon by the other madhab. So that's why we have these four madhab, right? Now, how do you know which madhab do you follow? Who knows? Or how did the madhab spread, first of all? So we have certain regions on earth that follow specific madhab, right? So if you go to North Africa, they follow predominantly Imam Malik, right? Imam Malik, they are Maliki, right? If you go to Turkey and then the subcontinent, except for South India is Shafi'i, but Turkey and the rest of the subcontinent, and Bangladesh is also Shafi'i. But if you go to Pakistan and then majority of India, they're Hanafi. They follow the Hanafi madhab, right? If you go to Palestine and Syria, you'll find a large majority of Shafi'i. And if you go to the Hijaz area or the Jazeera, the Arabian Peninsula, you find a lot of Hanbali. The reason these places follow those madhab is because when someone wants to study Islam, who are they going to go study with? Their teachers. And their teachers had to learn from teachers going back to these four madhab, right? And when these teachers spread or teach, who are they teaching? They're teaching everyone in that area that they're in, right? So that's how the madhab spread. So for example, even Egypt has a large Shafi'i population. Imam al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah, he died in Egypt. So Imam al-Shafi'i moves to Egypt. He has students that live in Egypt. These students pass on his teachings to their students, to their students, to their students until today. And that's why you rarely even saw mixing of madhab unless you were a traveler, right? Why is it so contentious today? And it's a very, very phenomenal situation that we're in today. The reason why the madhab are so, there's so much mixing, and you'll find so much contention between, especially fiqh issues, is because of two things. Is number one, we're not living in a Muslim country that's unified by one madhab, and then also in the internet. So when you have an imam saying something on the internet, and then you have three other imams disagreeing with him in the comments, and they're all valid opinions, right? That wasn't seen rarely except in areas of scholarship or areas of knowledge with the imams themselves when they already knew about these discussions. But for the layman, has any time in the past anyone ever gone to the internet to ask a question? If you were born 100 years ago, where would you go if you had a question about Islam? Go to the local scholar, the imam of the masjid, right? The imam of the masjid, he typically follows one madhab, I'd say 90% of the time, right? Very rarely you'll find an equal split amongst the madahib, right? They go to the local scholar. Nowadays, where do you go? Google. Google's the first thing, right? So if I'm living in, for example, in Palestine right now, which is predominantly Shafi'i, right? And I look up a fatwa, and I look up an Islamic ruling on something, and the answer that comes up is Maliki or Hanafi. Am I going to follow that fatwa, or am I going to go ask my imam? Just out of convenience, I already have the answer. I'm just going to go follow that fatwa. And then when I hear someone else asking imam the same question, and I already have the answer in my head, I'm going to be like, no, I heard this. And that's where the issue of the madhab comes into play today. But in the past, you rarely saw intermixing except in either areas of trade or in like Mecca and Medina, where a lot of people travel or where that happens. But in a city, it was almost always the city is one madhab, right? Now, okay, I'm gonna think of an example of difference of opinion between madhab. So I'm trying to think of a good one where it's because most of them they all agree on something and maybe one is the outlier. Um, yeah, Asr time, no, because you have ijma' of the other three and then Imam Hanif is alone. Um, that's a good one. That's a perfect one, right? Because for this one, for if a dog is najis, or if a saliva of a dog. Now, this shows how the thinking of the four imams, because they all have different, what's the word? Principles? I don't know if that's the proper word or not. But they all have different ways of understanding hadith and Quran. We have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he said, if a dog comes and licks from your food bowl, then you wash it 7 times and once with dirt, right? You wash it 7 times and once with dirt. That's the hadith. Does the hadith mention if the saliva of the dog is najis? No. Does the hadith mention if the dog is najis? Does the hadith mention if any other details? It's a very short hadith. That's it. When Imam Abu Hanifa heard this hadith, he said this means the saliva of the dog is najis. Why? Because you wash the bowl 7 times, once with dirt, because the saliva of the dog is najis and it touched the bowl. Does that make sense? That's the Hanafi madhab. Now, Imam al-Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad, what did they say? They said the whole dog is najis. The whole dog, including the fur, is the same as a pig, is najis, right? They said the whole dog is impure, not just the saliva. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he said the saliva is impure. Now Imam Ahmad, and they bring other evidences as well. They bring other evidences as well. Imam Abu Hanifa said just the saliva of the dog is impure. And Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad, they said the whole dog is impure, right? Not just the saliva, the whole dog. What did Imam Malik say? Imam Malik said it's not impure, but this is just an act of worship that you do after this happens. That's the opinion of Imam Malik. Now everyone's going to become Maliki so that they can have a dog, right? No. And Imam Malik said it's just an act of worship. It's an ibadah that you do. Same way when you lose wudu, when you like use the bathroom or something, what do? You make wudu. Same way. If a dog licks from your bowl, you wash it like this. It's the same as it's just another ibadah. It's another ritual that we do after this happens. How do we know which one is correct? Because can you combine them? So that's the first thing. You try to combine them if you can. Can you combine them? No. Maybe you can combine the Hanafi and the Shafi'i and Maliki. As you can say, okay, Imam Hanifa was like it's kind of close, but we can say the dog is najis, and that combines those three. The whole dog is najis. But that's an outlier from Imam Malik, right? So how do we combine them? You don't, because we're not scholars, right? What's the best answer that anyone can give to a question? I don't know. And it should be the most common answer that comes out of your mouth, right? If someone asks you a question you don't know and you start answering, what's going to happen? You're going to lie on Allah and you're going to lie on His Messenger, you're going to lie on His deen, right? So if you don't know a question, you say, I don't know, right? For us, the best thing to do is go ask a local imam, follow what the local imam does, right? Now, when it comes to following a specific madhab, that should, like my shuyukh say that's best to do that only if you're studying. If you're becoming a student of knowledge, that's when you study one madhab in its entirety, and then you study the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, right? But as a layman, you go to your local imam. Why? Like I already mentioned, no imam typically follows one madhab in its entirety. They'll find some disagreements where there's stronger opinions in other madhab, right? So, for example, one of my shuyukh, he's a Shafi'i. He's hardcore Shafi'i, right? Majority of them, he follows the Shafi'i opinion. But there's a few issues he says, no, Imam Shafi'i was incorrect here. based off of this hadith and this ayah, there's stronger evidences supporting another madhab. So in that mas'ala, in that issue, he follows another madhab. So the best way to practice Islam isn't to just go off one madhab. Go to a scholar, go to your local imam, ask him. Do you question what the imam says? If there's reason to. If there's reason to. So if you go to an imam and all your life you've heard something, all your life you've heard that dogs are najis. Then you go to your imam and the imam says no, they're not. Then you could be like, okay, can you explain? Because I'm confused. That's when it's allowed. One of my shuyukh, he gets like, I've seen him happen. Someone came and asked him a question, and the person asked, "Wama dalil is what is the evidence for this?" He got upset. He's like, "You're coming like come up with the opinion yourself. If you don't trust me, come up with the opinion yourself. But you're coming to ask someone that studied. You trust their opinion, and then ask for the deal." And then he gave him the evidence anyways. Okay. Did that answer your question? Okay. Jazakallah Khair. What's the next misconception? I don't think it's that hard. Come on, like we're the most attacked religion. Yeah.
Some people ask, oh, so when you're doing evil things, does Allah allow you to do those things? How do you explain that?
So qadr, the issue of qadr. If there was an easy answer, we wouldn't have this question, right? So in Islam, we believe that all humans have the ability to do whatever they want from their own accord. Were any of you guys forced to come to the halaqah today? No, you all chose to come here. You all drove here. You all walked here. You all chose to come to the halaqah today. I hope, right? Blink twice if you need help, right? No. Now, we all actively made that choice, but we also know that Allah, everything happens according to His will, according to His permission. So it seems like a contradiction, right? It seems like a contradiction. Is Allah is willing something, it happens because of His permission, and then us also having our own will and our own desire and action to do things. To put it simply, this is the best answer I can give you. This is the secret of Allah and His creation. If Allah was to explain how it works, we wouldn't understand it. And Allah hasn't explained how it works, so we can ask Allah on the Day of Judgment or in Jannah, inshallah. Right? There's like this is a very large issue, and we have a lot of like Muslim groups have split off because of this, right? Where they innovate new ideas and they begin denying aspects of Allah. So you have, for example, you have some people say Allah doesn't know everything, and we have our own free will, and Allah doesn't know what we're going to do in the future, right? You have the people that say there is no free will, we're all majbur, we're all forced to do whatever we want, right? Do we say that? No, we say both. Do we understand it? No. Will we ever understand it? No. Right? Islam is specific, like every science in history, as more time goes, it progresses and we gain more knowledge in it. Right? What's more advanced, the biology of today or the biology of 100 years ago? Biology of today, right? But what's more advanced, the science of Islam 1300 years ago or the science of Islam today? 1300 years ago, right? So Islam is the only science where, or Islamic science is the only science as more time goes on, scholarship level drops and the knowledge of the people goes down. The most simple answer that you could answer this question, this is the secret of Allah and His creation. We don't know. Yeah. And even like some people, like from my experience, some people accept this and they get it easily. Some people don't. Right? Some people, as soon as they hear, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense, I'll accept it. Other people, they'll come to ask the same question every day. They don't understand it, and that's just Allah created different people different ways. What's important isn't that we understand it; it's that we accept it. It's that we accept it because this is a part of the 6 pillars of Iman, right? 6 pillars of Iman. The last pillar is the belief in Allah's Qadr, the belief in Allah's will, right? And Allah's strength and Allah's determination, right? Good question. Anything else?
So one of my friends actually asked me this in Quran about the story of Ayub alayhi salam. Allah said that when he made a promise that he will his wife.
Yeah.
So there is an ayat about that. I don't remember exactly, but my friend asked that how Allah can allow this prophet to uh, hit his wife.
I'm forgetting the
So how
verse.
Islam can allow this?
I'm forgetting the verse off the top of my head. Give me 1 second. وخذ بيدك ضغثا فاضرب به ولا تحنث إنا وجدناه صابرا إنه إنه أواب, right? So who knows the story of Sayyidina Ayyub, right? Do we know it? Or we'll do a quick recap. So Sayyidina Ayyub, alayhi salam, he was a prophet, and he was given many riches as a prophet, right? It mentions that he was a prophet for 60 years, and he was very wealthy. He had a lot of children, and he had anything that you'd want in life, he had it. And then what happened is Allah tested him. So Allah removed these things. He had his children passed away. He lost all of his wealth, and he even developed a skin disease, right? He developed a skin disease that disfigured him, right? Some people say it's leprosy, some people say other skin diseases, where he became disfigured as his skin was falling off. Now, Prophet Ayyub, he has an immense patience. So when all of these calamities and all these tragedies happened, what did he do? He remained patient. He had sabr, right? He was patient and he didn't complain. And it's even narrated that his wife began begging him to ask Allah. Like she asked Allah to remove these calamities from you, right? And what did Prophet Ayyub say? He said, I was healthy and wealthy and handsome and beautiful for 60 years, and I've only been sick for how many years? 6 years. In the narrations mentioned he was sick. So how can I ask Allah when I've only been, like, it's the ratio is off of healthiness versus unhealthiness and sickness, right? And it wasn't until uh, and the narration mentions that when his wife told him to make dua, he got angry at her, and he said, when I get healthier, I'm going to lash you 1,000 times or 100 times. One of the two, I don't remember. Right? He mentions, so he's going to beat his wife. Why? Because he got so angry. How dare you come and tell me to ask Allah to remove this calamity from me when I have the opportunity to be patient, right? And then what happened is his wife, because of how poor they were, she cut off her hair and she was selling it in the market. So when Ayyub alayhi salam saw his hair, that's when he asked Allah to remove this calamity from him, right? So in the hadith mentions that his wife left and he made dua to Allah, and then locusts began coming down. And this is a hadith in Bukhari. Locusts made out of gold. You guys know what a locust is? It's like a big cricket. It's like really big. Uzair was just in Umrah. You've seen them, right? They're huge, right? Like this big, some of them. And they were made of gold and they were falling from the sky. And even the hadith mentions, subhanAllah, it's a very beautiful hadith. It mentions that he was collecting them and he was rushing to collect them. Imagine it's raining gold on you and you're rushing to collect it, right? And Allah asked him, he said, why are you rushing to collect it? And he said, I deserve more blessings. Like I want more and more blessings. Like I don't want to take it for granted, right? And then a spring was opened up at his feet and he began washing in the water and his skin disease was healed, right? So his wife returned and she didn't recognize him because he was a handsome young man again, right? And she didn't recognize him. And then he said, I am Ayyub, right? Now, he returned healthy. And what was the oath he made? He's going to lash on his wife. And Allah mentions in the Quran that Allah commanded him, فَخُذْ بِيَدِكَ دِغْثًا فَضْرِبْ بِهِ وَلَا تَحْنَثْ. Is hit her, take, what's dighth? Who knows what dighth is in Arabic? Dighth is grass, right? فَضْرِبْ بِهِ, and hit with it. And don't go back on your promise, right? So, and this is a wise, like, what's the benefit of this? Is for if a Muslim is angry and they say wallah rashly, you don't have to follow it to the extreme letter of the law. You can be more lenient and still fulfill your oath, right? So, for example, if I said to Uzair, I said, wallah I'm going to hit you, right? Does that mean I have to come and punch him with all my might? No, I can just come like this. Did I hit him? Just, yeah. So Allah is teaching Ayyub and He's teaching us as well. This reason He mentioned in the Quran is He went and He hit his wife with grass. So He went and He hit his wife with grass like this. Did He hurt his wife? No. But did He fulfill His promise? Yes. So that's a good question, very good question. Right? Is Allah is teaching us ways. You're not lying, but if you regret saying something, or if you don't want to do something fully, then there's ways you can not. It's not a loophole, but ways you can make it easier upon yourself. Right?
The person who asked me, he was saying if it's demeaning women and why he had to lash her. So how to answer this kind of question?
Why did He make the promise to lash her?
If it's demeaning women,
I don't understand. If it's demeaning woman to lash him, to lash her,
there is a discrimination that men can hit his wife. It's allowed for men
Okay, I understand. Now, if his wife made the same promise that Allah, I'm going to hit you, the same applies. She can get grass and she can hit her husband like this, right? It's not about men. The only reason he made that oath is because he was angry, right? He was angry at his wife. But if the verse was applied, the same rule is if like if a girl curses at her husband, says, "I'm going to lie, Wallah, I'm going to lash you 100 times," she can do the same. She can lash him with grass and it's fine. Now, when it comes to the disciplining of men versus women in Islam, this is an ayah in Surah An-Nisa, right? And this verse is a very famous verse. This is a good misconception. One of you guys should have thought of it earlier, right? I'm surprised it took this long to come up, right? This is one of the first things that come up. Um, the ayah in Surah An-Nisa, I'm forgetting the number right now. Find it. Look for it. Find it. The verse of hitting women, Surah An-Nisa. I think it's 34, maybe. Something like that. Now, the ayah mentions that if you find your wife doing something haram, basically, if you find your wife doing something haram, now, the first thing that you do is you tell her to stop. And the next thing that you do is you separate yourself from the bed. Now, the ulama say either that means you sleep in the same bed but you don't approach her, or you sleep on the couch, for example, to show that you are upset with her. And what's the third thing? You do darab, you fadribuhun, is you hit them, right? And then after that is divorce, right? Now, how do we understand the Quran, first of all? There's different ways of understanding the Quran. The first thing is through the Quran, right? So if Allah mentions something in a verse and He explains it in another verse, you're doing tafsir of the Quran with Quran. And the second way is, what's the second way we understand the Quran? Hadith is the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu, right? And then the third way is the Salaf Saleh, the Sahaba, and then their students and their students, and then the scholars of Islam, right? So those are the 5 main ways. Did you send it to me? No, that's another message. Ah, he did send it to me. Is it 34? SubhanAllah, I got it right. Okay, nice. It's towards the end of the verse. So, and if you sense ill conduct from your woman, advise them first. Okay, so number one, we have to understand what ill conduct is. Is ill conduct putting too much salt on the food? Is ill conduct, what's another thing? Being too loud if you're cooking. Is ill conduct sleeping with the kitchen being dirty? Is that ill conduct? Is any of those things haram? No, right? So you can ask me like, yo, chill out on the salt. Don't put too much on the food, right? But does that mean you go and you be like, hey, like no more salt on the food? No, right? So the first thing is if you see your wife doing something haram, if you see your spouse doing something what? Haram. If they do something you disagree with but it's not haram, does this apply? No. But if they do something haram, what does it mean haram? Meaning something morally illegal, morally incorrect. It goes against the religion of Allah, right? So if you see your wife doing something illegal, the first thing that you do is you hit her, give her advice. You give them advice, right? First thing you do is you give advice. If she persists, what do you do next? Separate yourself physically, right? You separate yourself. If now, let's ask a question. What if she stops? She stops for 3 years and then she goes back to doing that thing. You go back to step one. You go back to step one. What if she only stops for 1 week? You go back to step one. Or you always go back to step one. Now, what if she doesn't stop and she continues? What do you do next? You hit her, right? The ayah says darab, right? And we're going to get into the word darab in Arabic now. Ba, right? This word, what does it mean? After you hit her and if she persists, what do you do next? That's what you do first. Now, we already mentioned it's not for anything small. Too much salt or too much pepper on the food is not a valid reason, right? But if they're doing something morally wrong, like for example, if they're backbiting excessively, right? Or if they're doing something like nothing's coming to mind, anything haram, like explicitly haram, and they're doing it, and after you advise them, they continue. That's when you do darab, right? Now, what does the word darab mean in Islam? It means hit. This the word for translation means hit. Now, who knows what tayammum is? Tayammum is when if there's no water around and you need to make wudu or ghusl, you do it with dust. Now the hadith of tayammum, it says wadribu wujuhukum, is hit your faces. Does that mean you're gonna go sock your face? No, it means you get some dust on your hands and you pat your face, right? Does this hurt if I go like this? Does that hurt? Is that gonna leave a mark? No. right? So the word darab can have different contexts. So the people that translate it word for word as beat or discipline, that's not the meaning. It means hit, right? Now, how do we know the severity of the hitting? We already mentioned we learn the Quran from the Quran. Secondly, from the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, right? Now, Ibn Abbas. Who's Ibn Abbas? Who knows who Ibn Abbas is? Who knows who Ibn Abbas is? Ibn Abbas is the cousin of Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, right? And he was Ibn Abbas. Abbas is the uncle. Ibn Abbas is the son of Abbas. See, Abdullah ibn Abbas, he's the cousin of Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, and he is one of the major scholars of the Sahaba, right? Especially when it comes to the Quran. Especially when it comes to the Quran, right? And Ibn Abbas, when he was asked, what does this mean? What does this verse mean? وَضِبُونَ, is it to hit them, right? Ibn Abbas says, with a miswak. What's a miswak? It's a toothbrush, right? And then the Prophet ﷺ also mentioned in other hadith that when you hit, you don't cause pain, you don't leave a mark, you don't leave a bruise or like a red mark or anything. And what's the third one? You don't leave a mark, you don't cause pain. Is that it? I think that's it. Anyways, even with these two, if I hit someone and I don't leave a mark and I don't cause pain, is that really hitting? No. So when a wife persists in doing these wrong things, right? And it's not something I dislike, it's something haram. I want you guys to keep this in mind. Something haram, meaning something not allowed Islamically, right? And she persists in doing it. You've already given her advice, you've already separated yourself, and you come and you hit her without leaving a mark. Where's a marker? It's literally like a marker, even smaller than a marker. It's more closer to a pencil, right? Does that mean it's going to cause pain? Like what's the purpose of it then? What's the step immediately after this? Divorce. So it's symbolic. Is if you continue, I'm going to divorce you. It's supposed to be the last straw, right? Is if you continue, I'm going to divorce you. Now, can women do this to men? The verse begins, it's very famous. The verse begins, الرجال قوامون على النساء, right? Men are the caretakers of women. قوام, it means to stand above, or it doesn't mean above like in level, right? But when it comes to the final say, when it comes to protecting and providing and responsibility over, the man is responsible and he's the caretaker and the provider over the woman, right? Women and men, this is another misconception. Women and men in Islam, are they equal? In society, are they equal? No. But in the eyes of Allah, are they equal? Yes. In the eyes of Allah, they are equal, right? But in society, like for example, in inheritance, if a father dies, for example, or someone dies in the family, how much does the man inherit and how much does the woman inherit? Hmm? The son gets 2 shares, the daughter gets 1 share. Now, let's go back. الرجال قوامون على النساء is men are the caretakers and providers of the woman, right? Why does the man get 2 shares, the woman gets 1? Is the woman ever responsible in Islam for sharing her share? No. But is the man ever responsible for sharing his share? Yes. It's his responsibility. It's haram if he doesn't, right? If my sister needs money and I don't give her, and not money for, oh, I want a nice purse. No, like she needs money for food, for shelter, for water, for survival, and I don't give her, it's a sin upon me. But if I need it and she doesn't give me, is it her right? I can be like, yo, come on, help me out, right? But is it her expectation for her to give me? No, right? And that's why the scholars, they mention that the woman, they benefit in terms of livelihood. In life, the women are the ones that benefit. Because when you get married, the man is the one that's supposed to provide. The man is the one that's supposed to protect. The man is the one, he's the caretaker of the woman, not the other way around, right? But in death, the men benefits because they inherit more. Why? Because any wealth they get is going to go back to the family anyways. It's going to go back to the family anyways, right? And that's another good misconception: is are men and women equal in Islam? And it's really like goes back to extremism, right? Extremism always breeds more extremism, right? If you have extreme feminists, right? Extreme feminists where they're like, I'm talking to the level of men and women exactly the same in everything. Number one, who knows better, us or Allah? Allah. Did Allah say men and women are the same, equal? In the eyes of Allah, when it comes to good deeds and when it comes to Jannah and Jahannam, yes, they're equal. But when it comes to society and living and working and doing all these things, are they the same? No, they're different, right? And we already said Allah knows better than us, right? SubhanAllah, I lost my train of thought where I was going with this. So when Allah declares something, when He says that women get less than men in inheritance, are we to question that? Are we to write in our will, actually, no, I don't want this? No, right? Even wills in Islam, you're not allowed to change them. You're only allowed to change up to a third. You're allowed to donate a third to charity. Can you donate more than a third to charity? If I want to leave my entire estate, all my assets, can I donate all of it to charity? No, it's the right of my family. Right? We have a very famous Sahabi. Who's heard of his name? Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas. Who's heard his name? We've all heard his name, right? He's one of the Ashra Mubashirin. He's one of the 10 promised Jannah. He's a very major scholar of Islam, or major companion of Islam as well. There was a time where he was sick, and he thought he was going to die, right? And he asked the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, how, like, I want to leave my wealth to sadaqah. And the Prophet ﷺ, first he said, all of my wealth. He said, no. And then he asked the Prophet, can I leave half my wealth for sadaqah? The Prophet ﷺ said, no. And he said, can I leave a third of my wealth for sadaqah? And the Prophet ﷺ says, thuluthu wa thuluthu kathir. You can leave a third, but even a third is too much. It's the right of your family. Is when you die, your family is the one that inherits, right? So even some scholars say it's makruh to leave a third to charity, because it's the right of your family. You're taking your family's wealth away from them when you die, right? There's nothing. Inheritance science is fascinating. It's super, super complex. It's extreme. I think, like, my older brother, he studied in Medina. He said they spent 2.5 years just on inheritance. 2.5 years. It's a bachelor's degree. 2.5 of 4 years they spent just on inheritance laws. So it's a very complex subject. This is when, because every situation is different. There's no two situations that are the same, right? It's very interesting, especially when you have, like, for example, someone they thought was dead, he comes back, right? It's interesting how it goes. It's very interesting. All right. Any other misconceptions? No misconceptions? Yeah, go ahead. Man, I might refuse to answer this. I'm thinking about it right now. I'm not going to answer this. I'm not going to answer this. I'm not going to answer that. Ask your local imam what they say and follow them. Or do what your parents have taught you. Do what your parents have taught you. When it comes to the biha, just do what your parents have told you. Okay. Any other misconceptions? So if someone was to come and attack Islam to us right now, would we all be able to? Yeah. So she advises her husband. The woman advises her husband. But the same steps? No, it's not the same. Those steps are for the men, they're not for the woman. Yeah. She advises her husband. And depending on the sin, the man can leave Islam because of it, right? So if a man doesn't pray, is he a Muslim? He never prays at all, not even Eid, right? Is he a Muslim? No, right? Eid Salah, even this, because it's a very interesting subject, right? Is the Prophet ﷺ, he said, العهد الذي بيننا وبينهم الصلاة فمن ترك الصلاة فقد كفر, right? The covenant or the agreement between us and them, who's us? The Muslim. Who's them? Everyone else, the non-Muslims, right? The agreement or the difference between us and them is the prayer. So whoever abandons the prayer has committed kufr. And the scholars disagree on what does abandonment mean, right? The strictest opinion is even one salah. If you miss one salah, you're not a Muslim. So if also, and one salah out of laziness or out of intentional, like, I don't want to pray. Scholars say if you leave even, some scholars say if you leave even one salah, this is the most extreme opinion. If you leave even one salah, you're a kafir. You're not a Muslim. You need to redo your shahada. Yeah. Yeah, you have to redo your shahada. Or you can just start praying again. So this is the strictest opinion. Now if we go to the most lenient opinion, it's as even Eid Salah. The Eid Salah is the bare minimum, right? Eid Salah is the bare minimum, right? So some of the scholars say if they even miss Eid Salah, then they're completely non-Muslim. Some scholars say Jum'ah, right? And then some scholars say a period of time where even if he's, like, for example, around other people, right? If he's around other Muslims and they go to pray and he stays, then he's not a Muslim. So it's a lot of different things. Now, do we want to be in a position where the scholars are debating if we're a Muslim or not? No. So don't be like, oh, some scholars say I can go pray 8 salah, I'm still a Muslim. No, because even the person that leaves one salah, he's still a fasiq, he's still a fajr, his witness isn't viable. His witness, like, if for example, I don't pray except maybe Fajr or Dhuhr once in a while. I pray some of the salawat, I don't pray others, right? And I see a man stealing, and I'm called to the court as a witness. I'm not a viable witness because I don't pray, right? So it's a very, very important thing. Salah is the most important thing in Islam after the Shahada. And then what if you didn't pray for a while and you start praying again? In the Salah, you say the Shahada anyways. So in the Salah, you already say your Shahada, you become a Muslim in the Salah. Inshallah. Yeah. Okay. Any questions about this? Yeah, you'll return back to Islam. Yeah. Even like it's very like interesting seeing, because even for example Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad, they have different opinions on what tark means, what abandoning the salah even means, right? So I already mentioned that. And by the way, leaving one salah, so for example Salat al-Asr, some of the scholars mentioning if you leave off Salat al-Asr, you lose all your good deeds. Every good deed you've ever done, you lose all your good deeds for Salat al-Asr. And some scholars say any salah, you miss that salah, not for an excuse. If you have an excuse, like if you fall asleep on accident, not like for Fajr, sometimes like one of my students, he asked me, he's like, I miss Fajr. I'm like, okay, what time did you go to sleep? He's like 2 in the morning. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's no excuse. You still have to pray when you make up, but it's not a valid excuse. But if you go to sleep at say 10 o'clock and you set your alarm and you still oversleep Fajr, did you try to make it? Yes. Can you say you tried to make it if you go to sleep at 2 or 3 in the morning? No, you plan ahead, right? Plan ahead. Um, it's very interesting. I saw a hand up earlier. I don't know. Any questions?
I'm not really sure if this is like a misconception, but about the Dajjal being not being mentioned in the Quran. So how would you like? Some people will be like, oh, it's not mentioned in the Quran, but how do you back it up? Like, is it? I think it's mentioned in Hadith, right? Or
Yeah. He's mentioned in Hadith. I don't believe he's mentioned in the Quran. Nothing is coming to my mind. It's not mentioned in the Quran. Yeah, Juj and Majuj are mentioned in the Quran. But Dajjal is not mentioned in the Quran, but he's mentioned in authentic Hadith. Multiple authentic Hadith are mentioned about Dajjal. Right? Like it's not, and we don't just take our religion from the Quran. We take our religion from the Quran and the Sunnah, from the Hadith and from the actions of the Prophet Muhammad. Right? Now, if you want to go deny a Hadith, that's a whole different subject. Right? That's your Islam is questioned there. Right? Your Islam becomes in question if you deny a Hadith without valid reason. If someone comes and says to you the Hadith that I just mentioned about Salah, and you're like, no, I disagree with it. Can you just disagree with the Hadith because you don't like it? No. Right? Now, what if you're a scholar and you see a chain of the Hadith and then you question the chain? Is that allowed? Yes. If you're a scholar, are any of us scholars? Is all of our knowledge combined equal to 1/10 of the knowledge of a scholar? No, right? So I don't think any of us, inshallah, some of us do become scholars. That'd be amazing, right? But I don't think any of us are nowhere even close to the level of looking at the chain of the hadith or the matan of the hadith and disagreeing with it slightly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
talking about Hadith, there's like there's someone I know. Let's say when I talk about Hadith or something new that I learned, they're like if it's not in the Quran, then I'm not gonna like follow it.
What's an example?
Um,
Do they pray 5 times a day? No. Okay.
maybe not. So
Do they pray at all?
trouble as like a new viewer, like explaining.
Do they pray at all? Maybe. How do they pray? No.
So that's why, but you know, some people are like Muslim by name, or we were talking about that before. It's like I will just come with something, a new hadith that I learned, and it's like, especially like let's say not the hijab, just small things like okay, like eyebrows, or just small hadith that I learned. It's like I don't know.
Do they say the Quran is the Quran enough? Is that what they say?
Yeah.
Whatever's mentioned in the Quran is enough.
Like if it's not there, but it's being said in hadith, like they're not taking it seriously.
So when Allah says in the Quran, قُلْ إِن كُنتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ. Allah tells the Prophet ﷺ to say that if you love Allah, follow me, so Allah will love you. What does it mean to follow me? If the Prophet ﷺ saying follow me, what does that mean? Sunnah, right? Make dua for them. Maybe if you're very close to them, I would say avoid it because you might just push them away. Try to bring them to a scholar or an imam. Have the imam talk to them. Da'wah to people that you're close with is the hardest da'wah. Da'wah to like your family and your close friends is the hardest da'wah. It is the hardest da'wah. And we see this in the life of the Prophet, ﷺ, right? Two of his uncles refused to become Muslim, right? You see, Sayyidina Ibrahim, alayhi salam, his father refused to become Muslim, right? So many of the prophets of the past, you see their family refuse to become Muslim, right? Allahu alam. Take them to an imam. I don't know. Like I can't speak on a subject that unless they're here in front of me, then I'll talk to them. But yeah, I'm afraid to comment on that further. Yeah. Make dua for them. That's the least you can do, other than bring them to an imam or something. Keep them in your dua, inshallah. What's the next misconception? A different sect? What do you mean by sect? The Shia? Okay. Man, okay. Some of you guys are choosing hard questions. There's easier topics, you know. Like it's just, okay. So when we look at Islam, how do I answer this? Okay. So the Sunni Shia split, when did it occur? After the death of Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. So if you look at the religion of the people before the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam died, we know that's the true religion. Now, did any of the Sahaba when the Prophet was alive, did they hit themselves or beat themselves? No. The main difference between the split, it originated as a political split. It wasn't religious. It was a political split. It was based off of who should have been the leader after the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam died, right? And it eventually evolved into a group of people that say that we need a leader from the Prophet's family to be the religious leader of the community. That's what it eventually evolved into, right? I don't know. That's a very long topic. It's not a short topic at all. It's not a short topic at all. It would take lifetimes to read all the books written about this. Like it's not a short topic at all. It originated as a political split. Is who should have been the leader, right? You had some people say Ali, some people say Abu Bakr. Now, when Abu Bakr became the Khalifa, what happened? Okay, so let's look at the death of the Prophet ﷺ. He passed away, and you had people denying his death. So, for example, Umar ibn Khattab, he was denying that he was dead. He was in denial, like you know, what is it, 5 stages of grief? He was in the first one. Denial is he was saying, no, whoever says the Prophet's dead is a liar, and I'm going to behead them. Rather, he just left the same way Musa left for 40 days. Right? He was in complete denial. Right? Even there's another hadith of the Prophet. It was from Abdurrahman ibn Auf. Abdurrahman ibn Auf is another major scholar and major Sahabi in Islam. Right? It's a very beautiful hadith actually. They were traveling, and the Prophet ﷺ was in his tent. So Abdurrahman, he wanted to enter his tent, so he asked the Prophet ﷺ first. So even from this hadith, it's not related to manners, right? But even from the manners, we know that you ask before you enter, right? He asked, "Can I enter?" And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Yes." So Abdurrahman entered, and then the Prophet ﷺ said, "Watch out for these signs before the day of judgment." He's immediately teaching him about signs of the day of judgment. And the first one he said is "Mauti," is my death. And even Abdurrahman, he was shocked because they didn't comprehend that the Prophet ﷺ is going to die. It wasn't in their thought process that the Prophet is going to die. And then after, like the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Focus," and then he went on to different things. So the death of the Prophet ﷺ was a major shock to the Muslims. Now, you had a period of time where there's no leader. So people are confused. Like the Prophet ﷺ just died. It's the biggest calamity in Islam is the Prophet's death. The biggest calamity in Islam was the death of Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ. Because after that, that's when all the fitnas happened, right? You had a Sahabi from Medina named Sa'id ibn Ubadah. Sa'id ibn Ubadah was he was the leader. He was one of the leaders of Medina before Islam. So because the Prophet died and the capital of the Muslims was in Medina, Sa'id ibn Ubadah was going to claim leadership. Why? Because he was the leader of Medina, right? Before Islam. Now, who heard this? You had 3 people heard this from the major companions of Islam. You have Abu Bakr, radiallahu anh. You have Umar ibn Khattab, radiallahu anh. And you have, who knows the third one? Does anyone know the third one? He's one of the 10 promised Jannah, so there's a 10% chance. Actually, 80% chance, because I already mentioned 2 of them, so it can be one of them twice. Is Amir ibn al-Jarrah, Abu Ubaidah. Amir Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, radiallahu anh. The reason we don't know too much about him, or he's not very popular, is because he died. He was the second of the 10 promised Jannah to pass away. So the first was Abu Bakr and then him. But so you guys know his status. Umar said that if Amir was still alive when Umar was on his deathbed, he said if Amir was still alive, he would be the next Khalifa. Over who? Over Uthman. So it shows the status of Amir, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, every ummah has an Amin. Every single ummah, every single nation has a trusted individual. And Amir is the trusted individual of my ummah. He was a very, like the virtues of Amir ibn Jarrah is many, is plentiful, right? He's a very, very amazing Sahabi. Like we could go on and on, like talking about him. So these three men, who were they? Abu Bakr, Umar, and Amir. They went to who? Who was the Sahabi from Medina that claimed leadership? Sa'ad ibn. Come on, guys, pay attention. Sa'ad ibn Ubadah. Sa'ad ibn Ubadah was going to claim leadership. So these three men went to the Muslims. And Umar ibn Khattab, he's the one that narrates the hadith. He was planning on just, Umar. Umar was going to be Umar, right? He's going to be very angry. He was going to rebuke them. But Abu Bakr came and Abu Bakr spoke to them. And he told Sa'ad that you were there when the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that leadership is going to remain in Quraysh. Right? There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Al-Amaratu fil Quraysh, leadership remains in Quraysh, right? In the people from Mecca. This is a general ruling. So people use this to attack the Ottoman Empire, for example. But if you were to use this to attack the Ottoman Empire, 90% of the nations of Islam are from Quraysh. So what are you going to do, right? So Abu Bakr Mays, you were there. He pointed at Sa'd and said, you were there when the Prophet ﷺ said this. Do you remember? And Sa'd said, yes, I remember. So then what did Abu Bakr do? He nominated, who did he nominate? Abu Bakr raised the hand of Amir and he raised the hand of Umar. And he said, one of these two men should be Khalifa. Who said this? This also shows the status of Amir. This is another hadith to show the status of Amir. Now, what was Umar and Amir's response? They said no, and they pointed at Abu Bakr, and then Abu Bakr became the Khalifa, right? So this is how Abu Bakr became the Khalifa. The Shia Sunni dispute came from this. Is you have people saying that the family of the Prophet ﷺ, they have more right to leadership, right? That's what it came, and eventually it split off to what we see today. Very, very complicated topic. Yeah. Let's do one more. We'll do the last one, inshallah. What's the last one? Do you have something to say? No? Last one? That's enough? I'm getting a no. Okay. Khalas, we'll end it here. Jazakallah Khair, everyone, for coming. Anything I said correct is from Allah. Anything I said incorrect is from myself and shaitan. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.